Hello, welcome to our second PLC for the month of April. I'm Zandra Bell McCroy. I'm your PLC lead for 6 through 12 band, and I look forward to going through assessment a bit more with you today. Let's jump right in. So, assessment in the band class, we're still going to be on that topic this week. What we're focusing on is diving into formative assessments. We're going to dive into summative assessments and kind of talk about best practices using assessment data and feedback. So, let's jump right in. So, to review from the last webinar, we're going to talk about the assessment cycle and why are assessments important. So, just a reminder, this is our assessment cycle, remembering that we are establishing our learning goals, then we provide those learning opportunities for the students. We assess their learning. We use those results to then inform those learning goals and how we're meeting those and if we're meeting those so that we can start the process all over again. So, to move over here, planning and identifying outcomes, that's our establishing learning goals. And then as we move through the easy side of our assessment cycle, just collecting that data, analyzing that data, and then things start to get harder and harder. Sharing those results, making sure that feedback is given to the students and other stakeholders that need to be involved in that process, identifying and implementing the changes that need to happen, and then making those changes and assessing the impact of that change. And then you're starting the process all over again. So as we move through the assessment cycle, it gets more and more difficult, but it's totally worth it. So just a little thing to remember, assessments allow us to build better instruction, and better instruction equals greater student achievement, which is always our focus, is always about the students and their learning. So let's dive into formative assessments in the band class. So just a review, the definition of formative assessments. What do they do? Formative assessments monitor student progress, provide ongoing feedback to students, provide concrete information on how to make improvements toward achieving the learning objective or objectives. And then formative assessments are best when they are embedded in the instruction and are ongoing. All right. So, specifically, formative assessments in the band class can look like this: self-assessments on meeting learning objectives, so getting kids involved in assessing their own progress, peer feedback on meeting learning objectives, how are we doing, not just me, how are we doing, and then performance check-ins. How are we doing as a collective from the director's point of view? And using rubrics helps. So on a scale of 1 to 3, we're doing great, we're doing okay, we're doing not too great. Helps using that rubric to talk through and to quantify what data you're gathering from what you're hearing and seeing. So where do you start? Where do I start with building formative assessments? Some of you, most of you, probably already know how to do all of this, but we're going to go over it as if you don't. Just because. Why not? So first, ask the question, what do I want students to learn and how do I know that they learned it? That's the first question. What do I want students to learn and how do I know they learned it? The next question to ask, is the goal to create a good performance or a good performer? Something to think about. Really think about that. Is the goal to create a good performance or a good performer? Hopefully the answer is both, because both can happen. I don't want us to get into a cycle of thinking that both aren't possible, that we can't assess and create good individual performers if we're really working on creating good performances. They are not mutually exclusive. They're not separate from each other. Both can happen at the same time. And creating great performers will, in turn, most often create great performances. So the goal is to create assessments that encourage, not discourage, build confidence, not anxiety, bring hope, not hopelessness, offer success, not frustration, and trigger smiles, not tears. If students are breaking down in your office during your diagnostic assessments or your summative assessments, it might be time to rethink how we're building these and what their purpose is and how we're um, situating them in our instructional model, right? So something to think about. And that is not me. I did not come up with that brilliant little thing there. That is straight from Classroom Assessment for Student Learning, Doing It Right, Using It Well by Stiggins et al. So it's a group of people that worked on that. All right. All right. So let's get specific about building these formative assessments. So first, before we start to build, we want to put all the assessments in three categories. The first category is individual or group performance assessments to assess musicianship. That's the first one. That's the first category. And then selected response and short answer questions to assess theory skills. That's the second category. And then selected response and short answer skills to assess listening skills. So those are the three categories that we're going to focus on today. That's just the way I work. That's the way that I build my assessments. You do it however you want. But this is just a model for how I do things so that if you are in need of a model or a model refresh, that's what this is for. So everything is what I'm saying is not the Bible. It's not the end all be all of band directing, but this is the way that I work with assessments in my process. So some sample formative assessments, we'll go over those next. All right. And I also want to remind everybody that I want to give I want to give a shout out to this book, Scale Your Way to Music Assessment. I get a lot of my ideas about assessment from this book. I bought it a few years ago at the Midwest Clinic. And so I'm not coming up with all of this on my own. Some of it is just simply me using that book. I use that book to really kind of revamp my assessment model. All right, so let's jump back into formative assessments. These are just some samples from my classroom. Listening journals. We've talked about listening journals, and we use these in our classroom for diagnostic, formative, and summative assessments. We don't just use listening journals simply for formative assessments. We use them for diagnostic assessments, formative assessments, summative assessments, and it's really important. So I'm going to click on this, and I know you're not going to be able to see that. Sorry about that. This will be posted in our discussion or our discussion board, but the diagnostic listening journal that I use is there. One of the formative listening journals I use is there, and then one of the summative assessments I use is there. So that way you can see what they look like, but our listening journals that we use for formative purposes, it's just going to be more of I guess, a thoughtful listening kind of a thing. Tell me what you hear in terms that aren't necessarily music related, but we're connecting it to other areas of their lives. So cartoons and colors and all of those things. So moving on. We use music theory drills a lot for our formative assessments, but those can be, you can get that on the internet for free. Musictheory.net has lots of things, and there are lots of programs out there that don't cost a dime that you can use for music theory. You can also purchase music theory methods from all the publishers. So it's out there, and there's also music theory embedded into most method books to a certain extent, and then you can supplement that with your own materials. But we use those drills to measure their progress as we move through those units. We use several different types of playing assessments. I know the kids really get tired of me with the playing assessments because I just always want to know where they are. I don't want anyone to slip through the cracks. I want everyone to feel that they've been heard, literally been heard. So we use a lot of playing assessments for formative assessment, and they're typically really short, really simple, really quick. The first example is individual hotspot assessments. Each student completes a form with their designated hotspot. And a hotspot is what we call a portion of the music, no more than 8 measures, that is difficult for them. And everyone's hotspot is going to be different. It's going to be, for some people, it would be the technical section. For some people, it'll be some long tones or a lyrical section because of intonation. For some people, it will just be because of range or whatever, but that hotspot for them is specific to them. They indicate what it is, where it is. It can't be like measures 1 through 90. It needs to be 8 measures, no more than 8 measures, 4 measures, 2 measures, 1 measure, doesn't matter. What's your hotspot? They record themselves playing this section of the music throughout the week. So we're looking for progress, not perfection. So we're not always, with this assessment, we're not looking for mastery. We're hoping for mastery, but we're really looking for progress. So every day that they record those measures, it gets a little better. And we also take those hotspots and work them in class. So once they fill out that form with their designated hotspot on it, we have that data, and we're able to take those measures and work them in class. And surprisingly, they don't realize this, but a lot of them will have the exact same spots that we can mush together and work as a chunk in our class, so that they don't feel that that's their spot, that I'm working on it for them. And no one knows it. It's completely confidential. The only people that know are them and the band directors. The second type of playing assessment that we use, one of many, is scale check-ins. And we have a scale of the week. Last week was concert A flat, all the way from our ninth grade students to our 12th grade students, our, intermediate band, beginning band, all the way through to our mastery band. It doesn't matter. Concert A flat was the scale of the week. And so students play the scale and the scale studies that are designated for that key that week. And so we use self-assessment a lot. So they spend time in class working on these exercises, and students are responsible for recording until they like what they hear. So we work on these every day. The scale of the week, we break it down, we talk about it, we analyze it, we play chorales in it, we play technical exercises in that key. We just spend a lot of time in that key. Some classes, they just play the scale with the arpeggio. Other classes, they play the scale, arpeggio, thirds. Other classes play scale, arpeggio, thirds, technical studies, rhythm studies, all kinds of things in that key. And so we have them evaluate them. Again, it is about progress, not perfection. These are not mastery grades. These are not, did I get it? Have I achieved this goal grade? These are, am I getting their grades? And the third one I'm going to talk about is our full band assessments. And so we use the LGPE, the GMEA LGPE judges sheet for this. And we go over it. It's a big unit, and it takes about 3 weeks to do. And we go over each area and really get them to understand what the judges are listening for and how they are judging them at LGPE. And we do this in the fall so that everything that they evaluate throughout the year leading up to LGPE, they've gotten used to it. So it's not this big shock and surprise that, oh my gosh, they don't like our intonation. No, and I don't know what that means. No, we've been working on it since the fall. So we focus on one area at a time: tone, intonation, balance, technique, all the things. And they know their chosen area, and we focus on scoring that area based on our discussions. So each time we play through, the students are responsible for scoring their performance as a group, scoring their performance as an individual, pointing out things that they could improve, and get feedback from the band directors on how to improve those things communicate their understanding, and then play it again. And this is a continuous cycle. So they get very used to it. It takes a little minute for them to get used to it because it feels very intense. But we do that so that they are not just bystanders in their evaluation. They're actively engaged in evaluating their individual performance as well as the group performance. And it keeps them dialed in to what we're doing. So it's really easy to check out when you have whole notes, right, in a section, and woodwinds may be going crazy on 16ths, but you've got whole notes. And or brass has this whole fanfare thing and woodwinds have nothing. Or it's a percussion feature and no one's playing but percussion. It's easy to check out, but keeping them dialed in by evaluating constantly using that judge's sheet. So if we'll have a day that we're only focusing on intonation, we're really honing in on that, which is typically very early in the process. um, we we really want them to be dialed in, even when it's not them playing, so that they can identify when things are going wrong. The really important part of that is that they are scoring themselves. So they'll hold up a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, or 5. And then they'll tell us why. Why did you give it that score? And then we'll tell them, well, this is how you fix that. Now let's go back. You fix that one thing. Let's do it again. And it just keeps going and keeps going and keeps going. So that cycle allows us to get the kids involved in their own learning process a lot. And we want the students to understand their role in the success of the ensemble. So we don't want them to just judge the ensemble. We want them to judge themselves as a contributor to the ensemble, if that makes sense. Now, let's dive into summative assessments in band, okay? So, just to quickly review, summative assessments occur at the conclusion of the learning process. These are those mastery grades, not those are we getting their grades. Evaluate student achievement on the learning objectives, help to summarize student learning, and summative assessments serve as an aid in setting future goals. So as we are moving forward, those summative assessments help to inform those decisions about how we move forward and how we set the next set of learning objectives and goals. So in the band class, summative assessments can be characterized by unit playing tests. They measure mastery of learning objectives, unit theory tests, performances. And in this setting, rubrics and checklists serve very well. Did you do this, 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 and this? Can you do this, 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 and this? Did you do this at the mastery level, at the advanced level, at the intermediate level, at the beginning level, or the developing level? All of those different things can help with allowing you to evaluate whether or not students met those goals that you set for yourselves. So getting specific, again, putting the assessment into 3 categories: individual or group performance assessments to assess musicianship, music theory assessments, and then listening assessments. So some sample summative assessments that we use in our classroom. Music theory assessments, we have started recently using composition as our music theory summative assessment, not just paper pencil test or virtual online tests that are just multiple choice or check boxes or whatever Google form or Microsoft form that you're using. But composition, we're taking those concepts that we use to have the students synthesize the skills and concepts covered in the drills. So we take the information in the unit, we have them learn the drills, and then we have them put it into effect with composition. And this is our first year using composition as a summative tool, and it has been really effective. Some kids love it. Other kids do it, but they don't necessarily love it, but they do it. But the thing about it is that we've been able to keep the compositions very controlled. So they get very specific instructions. you're only going to do this, this, and this with these notes at this time in this way. So it's really scripted. It's really prescribed. And so this is our first year using this as a summative tool, and it's really worked well. So I would recommend composition might be a great tool to use, but there are lots of ways to do this for free. So listening journal mock judging. So we turn all of these adolescents into certified GMEA judges, large group judges, and we use our recording from our large group performance and we have them pretend to be a judge. And we use this listening journal template and it is posted in our discussion area so that you can look over it. It's really useful and it gets specific and it doesn't allow them to just check boxes, but they also have to give us some feedback on what they think. So it's really effective. I would highly recommend doing that. And I'm going to go back really quickly just to talk about that a little bit more. Make sure that you've been training them to do this for the whole year, or it will be quite a daunting task once LGPE happens and they do this activity. If they haven't been training for this and learning how to listen for things and what is what and all of this stuff like that, then it can be a really confusing activity and be a little counterproductive. But yeah, if they've been working on this all year, it's super fun and they think that they're a real judge. So, of course, summative playing assessments. So what we have done over the years, and I can't take full credit for this because I kind of got this idea from my husband. They're given specific sections. So I find the spots that I know I need them to master. I know that as a band director, I know that when we go to large group, they need to be able to play these sections, and they need to be able to execute them well. And those sections are probably going to show up in some iteration in their sight reading as well. So I need them to be able to understand and really internalize this idea that is in this specific section. And so we pass them off on these specific sections, and everyone has their own section. And so what this link is an actual chart. And that chart shows you, I am second clarinet. That chart shows you your row of actual chunks that you have to perform for your assessment in each piece. I give you the tempo markings, all the things, and then all the measures that you have to record. So some of the measures are the same from instrument to instrument, and some are completely different. And then we use a teacher created rubric to evaluate each student, and they get feedback on their recording. So what we'll use, because we use Google Classroom, we use a Google Doc and we highlight the box that they are in. And then we use Mote, which is just a Chrome extension, to give them verbal feedback. And so we just record it and it gives them a link to a recording of us talking about what they did. So it's a great way to give them the rubric so they can see that with the feedback on that, but it's also great for them to hear our voices talking about what they do. We haven't done this in 2 years or in a year because we haven't done this since last year, but it's a really great way to give them some individualized feedback. And the goal is to focus on individual mastery. We want every student to master their part, all of it. And so students are given several opportunities to complete the assessment. So they submit the assessment and they don't like the grade they got, they can resubmit as many times as they want. Now, we want every student to feel successful. So when we find that students are unable to play the music effectively, we rewrite the parts and have students retake their assessment with those modified parts. And that's the part that they end up playing in our performance evaluation. And if the philosophy behind that is if they play everything on the page, they feel completely invested, they feel totally dialed in, and they feel like they are a part of the success or failure of the group. Hope that makes sense. So that's one of the summative playing assessments that we use a lot. Every year, it's a big deal. And we use it for concerts as well. So let's talk a little bit about best practices for using assessment data and feedback. I want you to think about this. Differentiation. How do we differentiate assessments to meet the needs of our students? So, are all of your assessments going to look the same for all of your students, or are some of them going to look different? It's really important, in my opinion, to differentiate. It's really important for all students to be assessed in a way that is going to lead to better uh, learning for them, to lead to better results for them, lead to lasting mastery for them. So if we're looking to reach every student, we've got to change the assessment. So some of my students and some of the bands get um just a little nudge, a little push. Their assessment might be a little more difficult, and some get one that is not so difficult. And because our band classes are already tiered and they're placed in band classes according to the level of mastery of musical concepts and skills that they have, we are able to differentiate assessments across all three groups. So, like I said, concert A flat was scale of the week last week. So the assessment for one class was 1 octave scale with arpeggio. The assessment for another class was 2 octave scale with arpeggio and 1 octave thirds. And then for another class, it was 2 octave scale, arpeggio, thirds, technical studies. And so we have the same assessment. The assessment is the concert A flat scale of the week, right? But the assessment looks different for each class based on their baseline, based on where they are. So we differentiate by class, which helps a lot. So, I know we say this all the time. We use our diagnostic assessments to meet students where they are. I know it sounds very cliche, it's real trendy, but we use those diagnostic assessments to place them in the right place and to build instruction that is going to meet them where they are and take them to where we want them to be. Once we have that data, we then are able to build assessments that are aligned with the standards and the students' needs. So it's one thing to align with the standards, but you also have to align with the students' needs. Where are their holes? Where are the gaps? Where do they need more instruction? We use that along with the standards so we know where we have to go, where we need to go, and we also know where we are and how far away we are from that goal. And so that's how we are able to build assessments that get them to their goals. And so we got to be kind of like mad scientists up in here with assessments. What do we do after we give an assessment? How do we use that data? All right. Um, you got to go, real mad scientists on it and figure out how to take all of this information that you've gotten from this huge diagnostic exam or this small little formative test, a formative assessment that you gave, and use it to build better instruction. So, using that assessment data. So, we use our assessment data to build our daily lessons, to determine future assessments, to monitor student growth, to provide students with a modified part if necessary, give students a confidence boost or reality check. Those using that assessment data is really important, not just for us to build instruction, but to keep students like grounded or to keep them lifted up. So sometimes they just need that confidence boost and sometimes they need that reality check. Provide students with a plan for improvement. So it's not just about us, it's about them as well. And a lot of times I like to think of it like how every time they're leaving class or they're coming into class, I like to ask them, "You having a good day? How's your day? You having a good day?" I like to think of assessments, especially formative assessments, as that type of check in. You having a good day? Are you doing okay? Do you get it? Do you understand? Is it clicking for you? So, using that assessment data to keep your eye on everybody and make sure everybody's accomplishing their goals and learning and getting it. So, that's all I've got for this session. I hope this was helpful for you. I feel very strongly about assessment and didn't realize it, but I just took for granted that we do so many different types of assessments in our classroom. And I think that you will find that you do way more than you think, especially informal, formative assessments. It is our thing. It's what band directors know how to do really well. So if you have any questions or you want to share some of your tips on assessment, feel free to reach out to me using the Godot Community 6 through 12 band discussion board. Let's share our ideas and come together and bounce ideas off of each other virtually. It'll be really great. And so finally, if you could just check us out on social media and visit our brand new Fine Arts Facebook page and our Fine Arts Twitter. And you can also visit the YouTube channel that we have for the Georgia Department of Education. And as always, thank you for your time. And I look forward to hearing from you and us working together to build better assessments for our band students. Bye bye.